just when you thought it was safe to go onto iTunes. This is Next Level Guy, the only website that makes self-development as fun as going to the movies. It's time to take the red pill and escape the Matrix.
What's happening, guys? It's time for another episode of the Next Level Guy Show podcast with your favourite tutor, Ian Dawson Mackay. Next Level Guy is a go-to men's interview, interest and improvement website where I quiz the experts to find out the hacks, tips, methods and protocols that you can implement in your own life to take it to the next level and live happier, healthier, wealthier, sexier and so much more. Today's guest is JT Maryniak. Jay became addicted to drugs and alcohol at a young age, and by the time he's 20 years old, his life had spiraled out of control and he had hit rock bottom in the November of 2005. He finally reached out for the help and support he needed and got sober and healthy. Jay spent his time keeping fit and participating in martial arts, CrossFit and endurance events, to name but a few activities, and he finally got the sobriety he deserved. Fitness helped to keep him busy and do something positive as he worked towards overcoming his addictions and his demons. If that wasn't enough, in 2013, at the age of 28, Jay was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. He now faces another big obstacle in his path, but that doesn't let him stop him from crushing every obstacle he faces. Jay has over 12 years' experience of training clients and helping them change their lives. He finds true purpose in helping others to achieve their goals and be better people. In this interview, we discuss Jay's journey, his addiction, and how he overcame his demons, how you can change your own story regardless of your starting point, the red flags to watch out for in your own life or for somebody you care for, the methods to stay sober, and how you can transform from being addicted to being awesome. Please note this was recorded some time ago when I was using another mic, so the quality isn't great. There was a couple of times the audio dropped out where I had to join them together and some bits are cut out. This happens only twice or three times, so please note that it will be a bit of weird audio levels at some points. Apologise for that, there's not much more I can do. This is a great interview. Jay gives a lot of great insight and really goes deep into a lot of things, and I had to share it with you. So apologies to Jay for the delay in getting this out, and apologies for the somewhat dodgy audio in places, but it's still okay to listen. I hope it doesn't take away from the quality of the interview and that you can get past it. Now, let's get to the interview. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to do this, Jay. I've been a big fan of yours for a while now, but there will be some people in my audience who are maybe not quite sure who you are. We're getting a lot of guys who are coming in who are interested in making life transformations, and I thought your story was awesome. Could you just give a quick intro to people, and just explain why you're so well known and the amazing transformation you made?
Sure, yeah, Ian. Listen, man, I appreciate you having me on today, and it's always a great opportunity to connect with someone and tell my story, and get my story out there, and hopefully help somebody out there who maybe is lacking the motivation or just maybe needs a little inspiration. So, yeah, man, I'm Jay Maryniak, and I'm from New York, so I'm an hour north of New York City, and as a young kid, I got into a lot of trouble early on in my life, and very early on, I found drugs and alcohol, and long story short, they eventually became the most important thing in my life. And by the time I was 15 years old, I was a full-blown drug addict and alcoholic, and from the age of 15 to 20 and a half, I just lived a pretty crazy life, and had a lot of really near-death experiences, and selling drugs, and I quit. I was a little bit of an athlete growing up as a kid, and I quit all sports. I quit everything that I was good at just to pursue the life of partying and just getting messed up. And by the time I was 20, my life had completely spiraled out of control, and I was completely unemployable. I was living out of my car, living from couch to couch, just like in a constant blackout 24/7. And I found myself in a place of complete desperation where I was like, man, how did this happen to me? And I just felt like in my gut that I was going to die. And I felt that every day for the last 2.5 months of my use and drinking and drugging. And fortunately for me, I was able to have a moment of clarity where I was so beaten down. I felt so miserable inside that I was willing to get help. And I reached out for help and was fortunate enough to get into a rehab when I was 20, like I said, and my life truly began there. From there, I got into a 12-step program and began my journey in sobriety. And early on, I got into fitness, so I started going to Planet Fitness and taking some martial arts, and and that just kind of evolved as time went on. I got hooked on fitness, and that became my new addiction, and I just kept going with it, and I became a personal trainer, and things were going really well, and I was sober a while, and then I was unfortunately diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and my life definitely changed for the foreseeable future. And I had to kind of regroup and learn and get used to living a life with a life-threatening illness that's incurable at the moment. And I just started posting stuff on social media around that time. So this is about 5-6 years ago, and posting about my sobriety and about type 1 diabetes and some of the fitness stuff that I could do. And I just started gaining more of a following, and more people started supporting the page. And you fast forward till now, I've been featured in Men's Health on multiple occasions, and done a ton of podcasts and a ton of video shoots for some big publications like bodybuilding.com and Men's Health, like I had mentioned. And yeah, my life has just completely taken on new meaning, and it's turned into something that I never thought was possible. I started my own business about a year ago and started selling workout programs online, and that's been incredibly successful. And I've now devoted most of my time to building that business and scaling that business as big as I possibly can. And it's been a hell of a journey. And I'm just sitting here today out in New York. It's snowing out. We've got some sleet going on. And, I've been sober a little over 13 years now, and I'm just truly living the dream and just truly grateful.
It's absolutely awesome. The transformation that you've made was just mind blowing. Can you think back to like your childhood? I think you were quite into fitness when you were younger, but do you remember the sort of that first temptation? Was there a moment? Was it just a couple of drinks that spiraled into it, or did you just think, no, I like this because it made you forget about things? Or, was there a reason that kind of got you into drinking? Was it peer pressure? Or, if you had to put a kind of name to it, or was it just a bad habit that you just lost control of?
Well, I always struggled as a kid. So always emotionally, I was always, a lot of anger. I was a very fearful kid. I was very insecure. And, in hindsight, obviously I can look back now and I can see it clearly and understand it. But at the time I didn't. And I remember just always feeling uncomfortable in social situations and talking to girls and, just like all that kind of stuff, just like really uncomfortable. Just never felt right. Always compared myself to other people, always wanted to be somebody else. And, that was the fuel, that really led me to a place where when I found drinking and drugging, it like solved my problem. It was like a spiritual experience where I didn't feel fearful anymore. I wasn't insecure. I could talk to girls, all these different things. All those fears went away. And so, um, I guess I'd been searching for that my whole life. I've been searching for relief from myself, and all those inner conflicts that I had. And it just, unfortunately, this thing runs in my family. Alcoholism and drug addiction runs in my family. So I believe I had it from day one, and it was just a matter of time before I found it. And again, like I said, it just took over early on, where it just became something that I wanted to do every day, all the time.
Yeah, it's quite difficult, isn't it? It's like, because I was like that when I was younger, where you don't feel right in your skin. You don't feel like you fit in, and it's easier to have a couple of drinks just to sort of calm your nerves and just be part of it. But at what point did you notice you needed, like, more, or you took it to the extremes more than other people. Did you notice it like straight away, or I mean, have you always got quite an obsessive nature? Yeah, because like when I get into hobby, I go full force into it,
Right.
and that's why I kind of avoid smoking and things like that, because I know I'd end up just killing myself if I went down that road. So, what would were you just building into it slowly, or did it just spiral straight away?
Yeah, I guess it kind of started slowly. I remember in elementary school, so I was probably like 8, 9 years old. I remember stealing cigarettes from my grandmother and going up into the woods with my friends and smoking, like huffing cigarettes as fast as we could till we freaking passed out and and stuff like that. Man, I was just always from the young age, man. I just was looking for that escape, and so once I really started getting high, it was an innocent thing. It was, smoking weed, and it was drinking. I mean, I was definitely a blackout drinker from the start, but it wasn't an everyday thing. It wasn't an everyday thing. So it was like on the weekends, we'd get high with my friends and get drunk. But as time went on, it evolved really quickly into some really serious drugs and some heavy drinking.
And was there a moment when when you were doing this that you noticed it happening, or was it a case of you just suddenly woke up one day and you knew you needed to change? Could you see yourself slipping this way, or did you think you were just having a good time?
I definitely did. I didn't look at it like I was going down a bad path. I feel like I often say when I speak, I didn't run with the bad crowd. I was the bad crowd. Like I was the bad kid. And when I got to middle school, I think that's where all the schools kind of combine, all the neighboring elementary schools. I met other kids that were just as bad as me, and it just really, really, really took off from there. And um, yeah, it just got crazy.
So, was there a moment when you mentioned you sort of just felt emotionally sort of numb to it, but were there any moments where it was a positive? Did you find, you mentioned that kind of spiritual awakening, but did it ever help you by taking the drugs to see things in a different way, or was there any positives, or was it just a case of you wanted to sort of get away from some of the feelings you had, so you just sort of numbed it with a drink and that, have because sometimes I found I kind of got a different way of looking at something when I was drinking, or when I was sober, or when I've been social. It kind of it let you see things in a different light. Did you ever find that with when you were going through that phase?
Absolutely. I definitely had some amazing times and some really big spiritual awakenings when I was getting high in the beginning. So, I experienced and experimented with a lot of hallucinogenics. I took a large amount of LSD and mushrooms, smoked DMT. So I really freaking, traveled, to other freaking domains, inside my own brain. And, through those experiences, it really awoken me to, some real spirituality in my life where I was like, wow, man, like the fact that I just went through that and survived it, there was a lot of growth in some weird way through a lot of those experiences early on. Unfortunately, as time went on, that kind of stopped happening and it just became a negative. But yeah, there were good times. There were good times with some good friends back in the day.
Yeah, and people always say about, oh, he's just on drugs. For he doesn't know, he's lost his marbles. All this, but when people sometimes use some of these things, like the tribes in Peru and Colombia and that sort of things, where they use it to, like leave their spiritual, like their normal body and with the spirits. I'm trying to remember what the name of it is. Aubrey Marcus was talking about it. Where they take the and you find out more about yourself deep down, and there's all these kind of traditions. So there's definitely something into it. I've never really kind of experimented with myself, but so how did you break out of this cycle? If you were using this as a kind of a remedy, a solution, how was that initial few steps? Were they the worst things you've ever done? Because I remember reading somewhere somebody said about cold. It's better to actually go cold turkey from heroin rather than try to take the drugs to suppress it, because you need that pain, the reminder of the pain, never to go back to it. But how did you start coming off it? Were the cravings bad when you were trying to stop your drink and drugs use?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I never got into heroin, thank God. But yeah, I mean, towards the end, it just started getting so bad to the point where, like I mentioned in the beginning, I couldn't go to work anymore. Like there was a few years where I could show up like completely hungover or nodding out or falling asleep at work, and I would do drugs in the bathroom at work, all that kind of stuff, and I was able to somewhat manage my life. However, I reached a point where I couldn't do that anymore. And, again, my mom had thrown me out of the house. So, I mean, my mom had thrown me out of the house so many times, but this one was, you know, really threw me out. And, I started, doing drugs I said I would never do. I started smoking a lot of crack, and, um, I was taking a ton of acid at that time. I was taking a ton of Xanax, ton of Percocets. I was just freaking out of control. And yeah, I even got to the point where, I said I would never stick a needle in my body. And that happened at the end. And I remember that being one of the moments where, beyond all the other things that were going on and my unmanageability, I remember that being one of the big moments of like, fuck, like I am really willing to do anything to keep getting high. Like I'm willing to, everything I'd said I would never do, I'm willing to do now. And that was a big moment of like a lot of fear of like, fuck, man, I am fucked. And I felt like that all the time. I felt so just doomed because I kind of wanted to stop. Like I knew I needed to, but like when you're in it, man, you don't see how that's possible. You just really don't. There's really feels like there's no hope.
And did it kind of, because I've kind of like I've got a kind of obsessive personality, like I've got OCD, and so I can kind of understand it to a small extent. But when you were doing it, I mean, was it a case of as things got worse and worse, you used it to hide more and more from it? Or were you enjoying the sensation of it, or were you just so used to it, or was it a kind of release from the emotional pain at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was still to some extent, but it just became more something I had to do. Like I lost control. Like there was no choice anymore. It just becomes such a part of who I was. And then the actual physical, attachment to it, and it just and then you accompany that with just the way I felt spiritually. Like I really just didn't care anymore if I lived or died, and just didn't care about myself. I hated myself, and I always felt like I was a piece of shit, and that I would amount to nothing. Like I truly thought I would never be successful. So you just put all those things together. Yeah, it just became there was no other choice. There wasn't a choice to not do it. It was like I just had to keep going, and I was willing to die. Going after it.
Well, this is why I think I was so keen to have you on, because I thought your story was really remarkable. Because you see these guys who come on and they've gone from a bit fat to 6-pack abs or something like that. But to me, somebody who's really hated themselves and went down the bad road and then turned it around and made an amazing transformation and then helps other people. Those are the kind of stories I really want to kind of highlight, because the stuff you're doing is amazing, and to go from that point to where you are now, it's amazing. And I'm like so glad that you found what you needed, because you're inspiring so many people. But how did you start that change? How did you avoid falling back into a life of temptation, like friends try to call you up and spend time with you, maybe take you down that kind of bad habits? Did you have to cut everybody out your life and move away after the rehab, or like how did you set yourself up to avoid slipping up?
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult at first, being, I still wasn't even 21 years old yet. And I remember getting out of that rehab, and I remember because I just kind of disappeared. I had the opportunity to go to rehab, and I just took it. I didn't tell anyone that I was going. I just vanished. And so when I got out, there were a ton of messages from friends like, dude, where are you? And so when I got out, I was armed with a few tidbits of knowledge to kind of help me on, my journey of staying sober. And one of them was, you got to cut out your friends, like you kind of just mentioned. And one of the most difficult things about being sober so young is doing just that. Because at that time in my life, my friends were my life. That was what I did. I hung out with my friends all the time, man. Like that was just what you did at that age. So that was incredibly difficult. When I got out of rehab, the first thing I did, I went and hung out with old friends. I remember going to somebody's house, and I think they were doing a bunch of drugs. And I remember sitting there just telling them my experience about being in rehab. And it felt like they were looking at me like I had two heads. And, you know, it wasn't, it wasn't a good choice. And it was tough making right choices in the beginning. So, that first year of sobriety, I was going to a 12-step program. So I was doing some positive things and really trying to make some changes and get better. And at the same time, I couldn't let go of that old life. So I found myself going to AA meetings, and then also on weekends hanging out with my friends, putting myself in terrible situations with lots of drugs and drinking around me. And by the grace of something out there, I just had enough, desire to stay sober that I was able to get through some of those times. And as I got a little bit older, and I had about a year and a half of sobriety, that's when I really started to realize that if I really want to have a good life here and really stay sober, that I need to cut out those friends. And so there was definitely a process in the beginning of letting go of that old life and kind of accepting this new life that I didn't know what that was going to look like. So it was tough. It was a tough one.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I was nothing to like what you were describing, but I know that feeling where you kind of have to, you have to move away or like at least step back and get away from the sort of temptations. If somebody had like a kid just now, like that was like your age, because for somebody your age to go through that life changing sort of episode and be so sort of articulate and understanding, like emotionally understanding of it, at such a like you're at a young age is amazing. But what would you advise somebody that's got kids who are maybe going out drinking a lot, who maybe don't feel like they fit part of the world? What's the red flags that parents should be watching out for? What should they be sort of talking to their kids, or how should they be dealing with them to avoid falling out? Did you discover a way that you thought worked better, open the communication?
It's a tough question. Number one, because I'm not a parent myself, so
Mm.
I don't know exactly what I would do. I mean, I've thought about it many times of, wow, what if I had a kid and it turned out to be me? Like that would be insane having to deal with that. So honestly, I don't know the right answer. However, I think it's just important for any parent to, of course, do their best to get them the help that they need and to love them as much as possible and support them. But it's a journey, even for a parent, because there's only so much you can do. A kid is going to do what he wants to do. Some kids might listen and get on a better path and be all good, and some might not. So it's a tough thing.
And you mentioned there that you sort of had a history in the family. I mean, I've got a history of sort of depression and stuff like that in my family. So did you find that the way your parents reacted was maybe how somebody reacted to one of maybe their problems, where that's how they were taught, you kind of reacted to it? Because I've noticed, like, we tend to pass it on, so to speak, and it's difficult to break that habit if it's like something that you've been exposed to. That's how we react to like X. Then your reaction to that is to do, Y. If that makes sense, it's like I find some people like they've never had somebody there to talk to them about maybe needing to go and say antidepressants. So they won't talk to their kids about going on antidepressants because it's easier to stay away from it. You know what I mean? It's sometimes difficult. Did you experience that at all? Anybody, like a member of your family, when?
It's an interesting question. I think back to I was just actually having this talk with my mom the other night. I'm very close with my mom now, and we were talking about how much is of our DNA here and our character. How much is that really environmental, and how much is that just genetic? And um, I think for me, a lot of it was genetic. My mom. I'm sure there was some environmental. My mom. So my dad wasn't in the picture a ton, so it was just a single mom with two boys, and she was a nurse. Worked crazy long shifts just to support us, and we kind of struggled financially a lot of the time, and she wasn't. She did the absolute best she could. There's no doubt about it. A lot of times she wasn't around, so maybe 'cause she had to work to support us. So maybe you know her not being around so much had something to do with me kind of spiraling a little quicker than most kids or something. I'm not sure, and I don't know. I've in no way blame my mom or my upbringing on how my life turned out, because I think it would have turned out that way regardless, because it was just, I feel, it was part of just who I was. So I think my mom, I think she really, again, did the best she could, and I think she had a hard time herself dealing with, because my brother was also out of control and really bad, just like me. So she had two kids, single mom trying to support us, who were getting suspended from school every week, and freaking cops being called. I mean, that poor woman. Really, I really feel for her, man, and I do everything I can now in my life to make her life as good as it possibly can be, because she really endured some tough times, and she really is a tough freaking woman. So again, I don't know how much of it was environmental or genetic, but um, I think it's different for everybody.
No, it's awesome that you've got such a strong relationship now, and it's difficult, isn't it? You forget sometimes that your parents are people too. That they're fallible. They've got their own worries, their own demons, the things they struggle with, and to raise two boys and to work full time is an amazing thing to do. I mean, was there any for male role models at the time? Would you think that would have helped you? Because something I found with a lot of people who have kind of gone down a bad road has been that there've been no kind of positive male role model, or it's changed rapidly. Would you have? I don't know how to say it, like, but was anybody there that was a good example? Did anybody at the time that when you wanted to make the change come in and help you, or was it all through your own kind of emotional numbness that you needed to make this change for yourself?
That's actually something I have thought about over the years, and I have a hard time. I have a hard time with that one, because I have no idea. I sometimes wonder, or I've wondered in the past, how my life would have turned out if I had a strong male figure in my life, and I don't know. I have no idea. Obviously, how different my life would have been if I had a strong father figure. Um, but I mean, it could definitely be. It could definitely be a factor. I definitely, my mom had a boyfriend at one point in my life who's someone who I loved a lot, and he loved us as well, me and my brother. But that was really like the only thing. I've never really had too many male figures that I really looked up to, and I'm sure I've got probably some pretty serious daddy issues at this point, man. I mean, who knows? I've never really dove into that stuff too much. I've always just it's just kind of normal for me to not have that figure in my
Mm.
life. So I don't know. I think even maybe it's kind of a positive thing. I've always, or for at least maybe the last decade, I've always been kind of a leader. I think, kind of a leader. I've always taken that leadership role in my life, and I think maybe that could be part of the reason why I have that quality in me is maybe because of that. I've kind of been forced to kind of create my own motivation and that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
No, I mean it's a great answer. I mean, and it's unfortunate. It's that there's a lot of guys growing up who don't have a positive role model, and it's a problem with society just now. Have you ever thought about doing slightly off topic? Have you ever thought about doing one of those kind of big brother schemes where you kind of go and work with kids who maybe don't have role models, who maybe going off the wrong path, and be that kind of father figure or positive role model? Because I think you would do so awesome at that, because you're so open, but you can explain it, and it's difficult for sometimes counselors who've never gone through the experiences to really understand where somebody's coming from. But like the likes
Yeah.
of yourself, who knows when somebody's lying, you can actually see what they're doing. I mean, have you contemplated that, or do you think it's easier to kind of for you to keep clean to step away from it? Because 13 years is an amazing accomplishment, but do you have to keep away from all of that stuff to avoid opening up that wound again, or do you think you could go and help others in this kind of having this kind of problem?
Yeah, so I've never actually considered that. I've never thought of that specific thing of, maybe helping doing a big brother kind of thing. However, I've go for it.
Because there's probably guys sitting just now who are thinking, I'd love to get in shape, but I'm always drinking and stuff like that. I mean, you could transform these guys because you could see what they needed.
Yeah, no, it's
Maybe
possible.
it's a product.
Yeah, no, it's possible. Fortunately for me, like I had mentioned earlier, I've been in a 12-step program, and I still go to that program to this day. So I'm still pretty active in the sobriety community. So I've been fortunate to sponsor a lot of different guys over the years. So I've been able to, uh, I guess use the term mentor guys over the years who were just like me and that are trying to get healthy and get better. And yeah, I've had a couple guys have some great success and stay sober, and unfortunately, this is a tough disease, and I've seen a lot of guys not be able to make changes, and they've gone back out there to life of drinking and drugging. But it's imperative for me to continue to stay active in my 12-step program so that I can give back, what was given to me. Like when I got sober, there were people in AA that, stuck their or reached their hand out to me and helped me in any way they could to keep me sober. And having been someone who's had some success in sobriety, I've been able to give that same thing back to other people. And I find it to be my job really at this point. It's my responsibility, I think. And I think I owe that to AA and just to the universe for giving me a second chance, so to speak, at life.
No, well, you're doing a fantastic, sort of give back, because the programs that you're creating are transforming people. When I was looking at your stuff, it was just a constant flood of positive and positive messages, and people saying how much they'd changed and how thankful they were that they'd found your stuff and that. But when you started your change, like when you started going to the gym, how did you start the initial change? How did you change your diet to cope with, like kind of battering your body with like the different chemicals and stuff? How did you deal with like maybe, keeping that motivation to go to the gym? Because it must have been difficult enough just for people who are going to try to just get fitter. But for somebody who's been on the wrong side of smoking and stuff like that, you must have been pretty out of shape. So how did you start that? How did you keep going over that initial kind of, I sod this, I'd rather just go and, not work out? Was it just that initial endorphin hits and you just thought, oh, this is great? Or did you kind of set yourself a goal, or was it a challenge that you wanted to achieve when you initially started out?
I do remember being in a Planet Fitness when I was newly sober. I remember looking in the mirror. I think I was changing, had my shirt off, and I had literally no definition. I remember I don't know, probably like a buck 40 at that time, something like that, and I had no abs. I had nothing, and I remember feeling like, man, when is this gonna happen for me, man? When am I gonna freaking start getting some muscle here? And yeah, I didn't have any goals. I honestly don't remember even how I ate at that time. I don't remember. I don't think that I got really crazy into diet even at that point. I was definitely, a skinny guy who was able to eat whatever he wanted at that time, for sure. Still kind of like that today. And so yeah, there really weren't too many goals. I think other than just getting jacked, man, and just putting on muscle and ultimately feeling better about myself. I think that was the key, man, was to start getting some self esteem because I didn't have any at all, and so that was the beginning, man. That was the beginning of the road for me to making some big changes in my life.
So now seems a great time to take a quick break and tell you about my affiliates. I've set up some awesome deals with some amazing companies, and if you go to www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates, or if you click on the affiliates deals option in the blue ribbon at the top of the website homepage, you can go straight to my affiliate wonderland. There you'll find so many special offers, listener exclusive deals, and discount codes available. There really is something for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're buying for yourself, a special occasion, or for someone else in your life. You can find whatever you need here, and there's a lot of inspiring companies and interesting products that you may not have seen before. Companies include Onnit, Amazon, MeUndies, Barbell Apparel, Dollar Shave Club, Grays, and so many more. It really covers every aspect of life. There's companies there that'll help you with dating and your sex life. There's companies that'll get you cheaper deals on sporting equipment and tactical gear and outdoor equipment. There's gadgets and gizmos that'll make every aspect of your life better and improve every facet of your life. If you need it, it's there. And there's even stuff there that you never knew that you wanted, but once you see it, you'll definitely want it. Simply go to www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and enjoy. Please note, I do not receive any information on you or your purchases. All I receive is a small commission from the business as a thank you for sending you to shop with them. This doesn't affect the price you pay, but it helps me develop and expand the podcast, so I'm extremely thankful for you taking the time to spend your money via my links. You're helping me make this podcast better and better each week. I'm becoming a better person by doing it, by allowing me to then invest in the podcast, get better equipment and better quality guests. Just click on the graphic below if you're on the show notes, or go to www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates. Now, let's get back to the interview. So if somebody's listening who's in the exact same boat, and they've maybe started moving away from their friends and they want to start to actually improve themselves or get fitter and, they start in the gym, what sort of things would you recommend for them? Like, did you go straight to like free weights, or did you just get a personal trainer and get some of the machine stuff? Did you do a class? What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe come out, been drinking a lot, smoked a lot, and then think, no, this is my time to change. This podcast has really inspired me. Where should they start? How can they follow in your footsteps?
Well, number one, you don't have to be. I think too many people, and having been a trainer for over a decade now and worked with just hundreds of people, too many people think they need to adopt, complete change in every facet of their life to even begin their journey, right? So they need to, not be smoking at all, eating perfectly, and freaking hitting the gym 5 times a week. And that's just not the case. And I believe that needs to be smashed, that idea that it's got to be all or nothing. And when I first started, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, when I was going to Planet Fitness, I was still smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes a day. And for the first year of my sobriety, I smoked a pack and a half a day. I wasn't ready to quit, but I still hit the gym, and I started off just on machines. I was at Planet Fitness, $9.99 a month. Hitting the machines, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing something, and that's really important. The second thing I did, I got into martial arts. I think that was the biggest thing for me. Going to the gym is great, and I'm not downgrading going to the gym, but I feel that martial arts has had a little more of an impact on my life because it was something where, again, there were classes that I was taking, kickboxing classes, jiu-jitsu classes, and things like that. So I was able to make some new friends and have a little bit of a community attached to the fitness, which just made it more inviting and just easier to stick with. So I highly suggest, yeah, classes are good. I highly suggest martial arts, man. I love, I don't do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai kickboxing anymore, unfortunately, but I still love that stuff, man. And I think it's so great to get into something like that. And especially for kids too. If I had a kid these days, man, that'd be one of the first, obviously if the kid didn't want to do it, I wouldn't force them, but it would definitely be something that I would try to get my kids into. I just feel it's just so constructive in so many ways.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I've been doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu now for about a year, and
Oh, nice.
I never. I never felt like I actually fitted in until I kind of started training, and you get like your team, like the guys that you train with, become you make amazing friends. It's a strange one. I think it's because you kind of choke each other out a lot, and you throw each other around, and it's strange to kind of have somebody sitting on top try to choke you, and you almost can go out sometimes, and it's like the only time you really get to tap into that masculine energy sort of thing, maybe a sort of spiritual side of it,
Yeah.
because you can come out absolutely knackered, and you then shake hands with somebody and you have a laugh with them, and you just kind of connect to each other, and sometimes it's like pure friendship. um I mean, do you miss it? Would you go back to martial arts?
I do miss it. I do miss it. There's not really any schools up by me, so I definitely would have to travel a bit in order to make it happen. So, but hey, that's not an excuse. At this point, I can say that I just haven't made the time to do it. But yeah, I do. I do miss it. I definitely just miss the Muay Thai and it's kind of tough with the jiu-jitsu for me because I have two medical devices attached to my body now at all times. So unfortunately, if I were to do jujitsu, they would probably get ripped off, and it would just kind of cause me a lot of problems. So,
And
but I mean, I'm sure if I really wanted to, I could somehow make it happen. But yeah, I miss it. It would definitely be cool to get back into it.
so you were diagnosed with sort of diabetes. Did was that from your former life? Do you think, or my dad's type 2, and he controls it with tablets at the moment. But was your how did your sort of diet change? When you came out of like drinking and doing drugs, and then do you think you had it during that phase, and it was part of it, or is there a history of that in your family? And how did you adapt your diet to getting fit and then having to deal with the diagnosis? Are you wanting to move away from that kind of and just make something, make your personal training the most for it, or are you quite proud of that transformation you've made and using it as a kind of not a unique selling point, but you know, is that what you kind of sell to your clients? Is that transformation, or would you rather be known for what you're going to do now, not what you've done before?
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. Actually, it's definitely something I've been pretty comfortable with sharing for many years now, and yeah, I mean, if anything, I think it just enhances my brand for people to know, what I've been through and what I've been able to achieve and kind of where it started and where I'm at now. And yeah, no, I don't get sick of it. I don't get sick of it. It's actually good and healthy, I think. for me to just remind myself and to hear myself say, and talk about what my life was like. Is it's not that I forget what it was like, but I've been away from drinking and drugging for many years, so sometimes it's hard to believe that I was even like that, man. Like it's just crazy that I was able to function and live like that for so long. And so yeah, again, it's all positive. It's all positive.
And does it feel like somebody else? I've often wondered, like, because when I look back at what I was like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I feel like a different person. I feel like pre
Yeah.
podcast and since I've started the podcast, I feel like two different people. Even since I started jiu-jitsu a year ago, I feel like a different person. I think we're always going through these sort of stages of evolution and transformation, but does it feel like you when you look back at the pictures and talk about it, or do you feel like you're kind of almost telling a story about somebody else?
Yeah, it feels like me. And even though I'm such a different person, I still have, character flaws that I've had for my entire life. I feel like those things always just kind of remind me of like, oh shit, this used to be so much worse 10 years ago, and that kind of thing. But it's, yeah, man, I'm just like you, I think with the evolution thing. Like I think back to 5 years ago and man, I was different. Even a year ago. I mean, the evolution sometimes and the growth feels like week by week I'm a different person. As long as I, keep trying to make that growth, make changes in my life, and try to be a better person.
Well, you've made such an amazing transformation. You're built like a brick shit house. When you see the pictures of like before and after, you're in phenomenal shape now. But did you find when you do CrossFit, and I think I read somewhere you said it was like another kind of awakening, that was the sport for you. But CrossFit's got a lot of like, isometric holds and a lot of like walking on your hands and a lot of gymnastics and this sort of thing. Did you find you had any issues with like your drink and drugs history? Was it more difficult to learn that kind of skills, or was it just a case that you just felt like normal compared to other people? How did you sort of compare to other guys competing, like starting at the same kind of time as you?
Yeah, no, the CrossFit was definitely one point, man. That was the thing I was most into, and I got really hooked on CrossFit. What's really cool about CrossFit is they just have so many different ways to challenge yourself, and there's just so many ways to continue evolving in your fitness. There's tons of different gymnastics things, like you mentioned, and walking on your hands and handstand push-ups, and then you get into like powerlifting, and then endurance workouts, and there's just so many things and so many different combinations that it's just really endless. So I think that was one of the things that really got me hooked on it was, it definitely brought out that competitive uh, part of me. And, as an adult, it's hard to really get into like real organized sports. So that really, I mean, they consider it a sport. And it was for me. It was something that I could compete in. And yeah, so it really just, gave me a lot of motivation. It's just to keep getting better, keep getting stronger, and just keep crushing it.
So how do you get? I'm really hating myself for this, but how do you get your highs now? Like how do you keep changing and evolving, and what's your motivation to get out of bed now? That you've got the business, you've made the transformation. What drives you? What motivates you to just keep going? And is it just building the successful business, or is it the feeling of wanting to give it back to other guys who are like you, or like what drives you each morning to keep going and building this brand, the following, and helping so many
All
people?
of the above, Ian. All of the above. So it's definitely a combination of things. It's the idea, and I speak about this on my Instagram sometimes, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, but it's the idea of that we're all gonna die, man. that's one of my biggest motivators. And it's like, fuck, when you really internalize that, I mean, it's, when you're a little, I mean, I'm still a young guy, I'm 33, but, when you're, in your teens, your 20s, it's, that you're going to, but I don't feel like it really sets in, until you start to get a little bit older. And, that is one of the things that just drives the hell out of me, just to make this the best life possible, because like we don't know if we're coming back, and we don't know what that looks like. We don't. It's just so unknown. So that is probably my biggest motivator, and just knowing how fast it goes by. Right, every year you get older, it goes by that much quicker, and it's mind blowing, really. So that thing,
It's
it's crazy, right? it's just
it's scary,
yeah,
isn't it? Just how fast a year can go. Like,
it's too much.
I mean, so if you thought about it now, like, have you had any slip ups since then? Have you always kind of stayed on the straight and narrow? Like, can you notice problem periods, or are you now so sort of set in your current lifestyle that you're not going to go down that road? Is it always a struggle for people like who are dealing with addictions?
The first few years were challenging. I didn't have any slip ups, so I was definitely a very blessed and fortunate guy who got sober the first time and hasn't gone back. But hey, man, in that first couple of years, there were times where I wanted to throw it all away. There were definitely times where I was depressed and I didn't want to freaking go to meetings anymore. I didn't want to fucking do this shit. And there were times I had pills in my possession, and I remember freaking like hiding them in my room and just like thinking about them, for like a week. And that's that obsessive mind, and there's a part of me that really wanted to get high and try to numb out the pain that I was feeling. But I'd say, yeah, maybe it was like 49% wanted to get high, but that 51% wanted to stay sober. And I was able to make it through some of those tougher times in those earlier years. As time has gone on, it's I'm not cured by any means. So it's always important for me to remember that, and remember that I need to keep doing what I can to help other people, and to maintain my own sobriety. And for the past, I don't know, 8 years, I can honestly tell you, Ian, that I have not had a bad day, because just at like around that 5 year mark, I just had a major perspective swing where I just didn't look at my life like that anymore. There are certainly some bad moments that can take place in a day, and I've had some tough times where I lost a good friend of mine, and had my diagnosis, some years ago, and there were never bad days, because I just look at life just in a wider angle these days, and it's like, man, my life is so good, even though this, you know, bad thing is happening to me right now. Like, it doesn't negate all of the blessings in my life. So, it's, I don't want to say that I've been coasting for years now, but it's gotten a lot easier to live. I still have times where I feel a little depressed, or feel lonely, or feel like I'm a fucking piece of shit sometimes. That stuff still creeps in, man. That's stuff that I don't think is ever fully going to go away, but I'm able to deal with it today. I know that it's just my ego and my pride just chattering away, and I've just learned to sidestep the ego, you know, and sidestep some of that negative thinking, and just keep pushing forward, man. So
No, I love it because you very rarely in these kind of stories hear what it was initially like. The real struggles. You kind of hear the kind of, yep, he wanted to make the change. He made the change. It's I think it's helpful for guys to kind of see that there are struggles, and you can keep going, and there will be temptations. It's never going to be just a simple road to getting fixed.
yeah.
I mean, were there mental strategies that you did at this point? When you're making the changes, to even now, did you find things like journaling, gratitude diaries, meditation, or was it just your inner strength that you just had to keep saying no when you felt that demon on your back?
I think one of the biggest things is talking to people in my life about what I'm feeling and what's going on. I think too many people don't talk about what they're feeling, whether it be they're ashamed or they feel like they're gonna sound stupid or sound like a wuss or whatever the reason may be. Too many people hold that stuff in, and I've just learned early on that I can't afford to do that. Right? I'm just not someone that can afford to bottle up everything inside because eventually I'm just gonna freaking lose it and make a mess of my life. So I've just learned over the years to talk about what's going on. Open up to whether it be my mom or I still have a sponsor. I have people in my life that are sober that I can call and talk to, and they understand. So I think that is the biggest tool. Amongst some prayer and some meditation, some spiritual reading, and things like that, and helping other people. That's probably the most useful thing that I can possibly do for myself, is to reach out and help other people. So nowadays, when I'm feeling like crap, yeah, I still might talk about what's going on to somebody, but it doesn't really have the power. What really takes away some of my anxiety and makes me feel useful and whole is helping someone else, like talking to one of the guys that I sponsor and helping them with something that they're going through, and forgetting about myself. That's the key for me is getting out of myself because I'm the problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like the problem lies between my two ears, and so I need to get out of my own head as much as I can and help others.
No, it's awesome that you found these sort of coping strategies, and they work for you, and that you can help other people with it. But what would you say to somebody listening who says, "Well, you've just switched one addiction for another"? Do you think people who are addicted always need something to be addicted to, and it's better to put something like a more wholesome hobby in place, or like a transformation, or a focus on their own self improvement? Are you one of these people that sort of follows that? You switch one addiction for another. You switch a negative to a positive. Because I always think I'm just changing obsessions, but I'm taking a negative, maybe when I was jealous of an ex, to getting with somebody else now, to focusing on creating a podcast, or what I mean. It's like, do you look at it from that point of view, or do you just see yourself as that was an addiction, but that's in my past? I just need to keep avoiding falling back into that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of the first. I mean, and also I find that when people say that, most of the time it just sounds negative when I get that kind of comment, like, "Oh, you're just
Mm.
replacing addictions." It's like, fuck yeah, I'm replacing addictions. I remember one of the first. I forget. I did some video, I think, like a little documentary, and it was published on something big where I got a lot of views on YouTube or something. And yeah, there was, those were the comments. Oh, this guy just fucking replaced addiction. It's like, dude, why would you even say that? Like, what would make you even think that was a good thing to say? Right? Because it's like, yeah, man, yeah, I went from smoking crack and taking pills and freaking wanting to die to, yeah, maybe I'm addicted to fitness, man, and I'm hooked on fucking bettering myself and feeling good. Like, what is the issue with that? Right? I mean, yeah, can you take that to a negative place and overdo it? Of course you can. Have I
Mm.
done that at times? Yeah, I probably have, but it is far better. Like, I am not a nuisance. I'm not bringing negative things to society anymore. I'm doing something positive for this world. So yeah, man, I've heard that one over the years so many times, and that's just silly to me that people even think of saying that out loud. To be honest.
It always drives me crazy of like how they've got to have a comment. There's got to be somebody that's got to be
Yeah.
negative. It's like, yeah, I mean, you might switch, you might go to the gym a lot more, like have that obsession with the gym, but that's better than maybe the way that you were before. And you see that on like YouTube comments, Facebook comments, like social media is a nightmare for people to try and make the change because nobody wants you to change. Everybody's comfortable. Nobody wants you to step out and change because it means they've got to start thinking about themselves, and it's really difficult to kind of step away from the herd to make that change. But it's amazing what you've done. So I mean, you've now created the functional method. You started your business, you're helping people out. Where did that kind of motivation come from? Once you started, was it just you looked at being a personal trainer and thought this is a career for me, and you create the business, or did you always want to do this when you were younger?
It was definitely a long time coming. When I say that, probably the past 5 years. So I remember having a talk with a good friend of mine from over there in Australia named Dave Nixon, and we were talking some years ago, and he was like, "Yeah, man, a lot of people that have following like you, they sell workout programs. Like, have you ever thought about doing that?" And I remember at the time saying, like I'm just not ready to do that, and I can overwhelm myself when I feel like I have some big task in front of me. I can very easily overthink and ultimately kind of paralyze myself and put myself in a place where I end up not taking any action, because it's not perfect. It's not the perfect scenario. And I lived in that space, I don't know, for about a year and a half where I wanted to do it. And I was like, yeah, I really need to do this. Like, it's a way to make money and, capitalize. I had other people around me as well, like some more business marketing guys and friends that were like, dude, you got to capitalize on your following. You could, you're sitting on a gold mine. And that just didn't interest me. I wasn't like totally in it for the money kind of thing. I was just kind of into building the following and building, what would eventually be the brand. And it wasn't until probably 2 years ago that I was like, oh man, I gotta just do something. I gotta just put something out there and see how it does. And that's what I did. I put out my first program, which is called the New Edge Performance. It's just kind of a dumbbell bodyweight program. It's just kind of basic, but really good program. And it did really well. So I was like, man, this is cool. This could turn into something. And during this time, I was training so much. I mean, over the years, like the Instagram videos and stuff like that. I mean, there's definitely a time where I wanted just to impress and show people how fit I really was, and just doing a lot of crazy shit. And I still do some crazy shit, but um, I was finding that I was burnt out all the time. I was constantly injured. Joint pain. I mean, just really kind of unhappy with how I felt. A lot of it was, again, run down and feeling like crap. So I remember talking to a buddy of mine. I know this is a long-winded answer, so forgive me. But I was talking to a buddy of mine. I was like, hey man, like, when was the time where you started to feel like you weren't recovering as much and slowing down? He's like, probably around 30, 31. And, I was 30 at the time. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm feeling burnt, and like I need to make a change because my body just can't take this kind of volume and intensity. I'm going to be freaking crippled when I'm 40. So that inspired me to, I love so many things in fitness. I love conventional bodybuilding. I love calisthenics, gymnastics. I love kettlebell work. I love so many different things. And I was like, I got to create something that allows me to do all the things that I love. And how can I do that without overdoing it or having it be too much? And so I just started kind of putting things together and figuring out a formula, on how to structure microcycles, right? So 1 week of training where I would be able to do all the things I like to do and not be too beaten up. And so that's what I did. I just created the functional method, with that kind of mentality behind it of creating a program that would, allow you to hit all different facets of fitness and be really functional, build strength, build muscle, burn fat, and not be beating yourself into the ground week in, week out. So, the functional method was born, and, I have 1.0 out, 2.0, and 3.0 that I just released on January 1st. And it's killing it, man. It's just been such a cool thing. I mean, obviously, starting a business and building a business has been really exciting, and have it be successful. And also, man, the feedback has been crazy, man. Just the amount of the results people are getting from from this. It's just been awesome. So it's just been an awesome journey. I really hope this is just the beginning. I'm already brewing up my next program. Hopefully, we're launching at the end of the year or in the fall, and hopefully, keep this thing going.
I love it. I mean, you can hear that passion, and I think this is what you were designed for, because when I was watching the videos, you were just ripping deadlifts off the floor. And then all of a sudden you're back flipping, and the next second you were like, I think I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's the bodybuilding.com video of like the one
Oh
take
yeah,
workout, and you're just watching it going,
yeah,
like you were just balancing on weights 1 minute, then like powerlifting, that was bodybuilding. It was just kind of like, holy shit, this guy's good. Like, and then you learn more about your history, and you're like, this is amazing. And do you think? I know it's hard to generalize, but do you think anybody that's struggling just now with like drinking, drugs, addictions, to an extent, can make this change? I know you've got to want it for yourself, but is it possible, do you think, for every guy to a certain level to be able to just say, no, I want to make this change? Maybe not to become as, sort of as rounded as you've become, but can they make the change without help, or would you advise everybody to get help?
I think there are some people out there that can do this, on their own. I don't think there are too many, though. I got to be honest with you, Ian. I think there are very few that can just, through willpower alone, just, will change into their lives. It's definitely possible. And I'm referring to, addicts and alcoholics. Um, you really need help. There's no way that I would be where I'm at today if I didn't go to rehab, get into a 12-step program, and then continue to go to that program and reach out to people, call people all the time when I needed help, when I'm struggling with something. Um, putting spirituality into my life, putting fitness into my life. If I didn't have all these things, I don't. I'm pretty certain I would have made it. So it is important to kind of smash the idea that you can do this on your own and just let go. Whatever pro
So, what would your advice be to guys listening? Because I know we're coming up to our time limit. In fact, we're almost 2 hours over. What would you say to people listening? Like, what would be your definition of a good man, of a masculine man? What would you give as the key characteristics of somebody as a good role model to be, like a good man?
Yeah, no, that's a loaded question for sure. I know for myself, man, I just strive to be, as loving as I possibly can. It's definitely something I've struggled with, my entire life. Is I'm not, the most loving individual to all people, which I'm sure probably a lot of people aren't. But I definitely strive to be, compassionate towards all people, and pass as little judgment as I can, although I fall short often, all the time with that, and try to make a positive impact on the world, man, and use your gifts, wherever those things may be, to impact others, and carry a message that we can, with the help of our friends and family, that we can continue to support each other and get better day in and day out.
With all the bullshit celebrities and role models that you see these up nowadays, you're the kind of guy that I want people to actually see and know that transformation is possible. What would you want them to, somebody just now who's struggling with drink or drugs, or is maybe going down a path that they really want to stop? What challenges would you set them, or ways to fix it? And what kind of time frame should they be working from? Is it like, what are the red flags they should be looking for? How do you know when it becomes a problem and when to seek help?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to define that for any specific person. I feel like everyone is kind of different, and I don't know. I don't want to necessarily just give a blanket statement. What is problemsome and what isn't per se, but if you were at a point in your life where, you're drinking every day and it is affecting, your career, your relationships, and so on and so forth in a negative way, and, you're having a hard time not drinking on a daily basis, it might be time to, reach out for some help. It might not mean that you're an alcoholic. I don't know, but um, again, if it's affecting your life in a negative way, and it's something you don't feel like you have a ton of control over, it's important to reach out. Whether it be to a friend or a family member, and ask for help, and let someone know that you're struggling.
Well, if you've got a bit of time, let's throw in a quick something, because I love to get to know the guest, and past these kind of stock answers, like when you see somebody who's got a book out, you could change the name at the top and they give the same interview over and over again. But I love getting into it and finding out what makes them tick, the life hacks that sort of that makes them them.
Sure.
So if I throw out some prompts, if you just come back with what comes into your mind, because that's usually the truth. If you know what I mean, so for example, what's your favorite podcast? What do you like to listen to?
Joe Rogan.
Any particular interviews that kind of stand out for you?
I just watched the Travis Barker one, which I thought was pretty intense, man. I mean, the dude really has lived a pretty incredible life and been through some really tough stuff, and he just seemed like a really chill guy. And I just enjoy the way Joe interviews people, and I always get something out of his podcast.
Is he the Blink 182 guy?
Yeah, he's the drummer for Blink 182.
He's quite a character. I remember watching an interview where the doctor, like the medic on site, was telling him off to stop super gluing his thumbs, because when he was drumming, he was actually ripping his hands open and just super gluing them back up.
Oh, is that right?
It was just that kind of, you could see like that level of passion in him, but it was like that kind of, nobody's stopping me doing it. I'm fixing it myself kind of thing. So what's your best purchase under $100? Something that's changed your life. Is there something that kind of pops out?
That's funny. The first thing I thought of, to be honest with you, was a back scratcher that I got from Pier 1 for like $2.99, like 10 years ago, dude.
That's not what
I can't reach my back usually because I'm just kind of just a little too bulky and not mobile. So that back scratcher, man, is fucking heaven.
If it's like, of all the things I was expecting you to say, that is certainly not one of them. Like, so if you had a guilty pleasure that you'd admit to, is there a particular song that you cringe if anybody's seen it, but you can't help but rock out to? Is there do you like knitting or something? What would you be, not ashamed, but what would you hate your friends to find out about you? Or are you quite open about it?
Yeah, I don't really have any. I don't have any where I'm like, oh shit, I gotta hide this. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, the first song that popped in my head was "Walking in Memphis," but even that, it's not like an embarrassing song. It's really, I got a T Swift song on my playlist. It's not my favorite song, but a little T Swift every now and then will kind of get you grooving a little bit. Stuff like that. I'm not afraid to. It doesn't affect me to talk about it though.
So this is one of my favorite questions. Now, you're sitting at a dinner table. You've got your awesome pap with you as well, and you've got 5 empty seats. And you've got to pick people. They can be real or fake. They can be fictional or real. They can be personal to you, or they can be like famous celebrities. Who do you invite? This is your dream dinner party. Who would you go for?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, man. Uh, I'd throw Joe Rogan in there. He's definitely someone that'd be cool to sit down with and talk to. So that'd be number one. Number two would be David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. He's a guitar player and vocalist from Pink Floyd. It's my
It's a good
favorite.
mix.
Yeah, it's my favorite band of all time right there. I'd love to just sit with that guy, man. He's such a fucking genius and a brilliant mind and musician. Um, uh, my friend Derek Haviland, whom I just saw the other day, he's just one of the funniest people I know. It's just always a pleasure hanging with him, man. I always fucking laugh like a little fucking schoolgirl when I'm around him. That's three. I'd say I bring my mom around. Love my mom. I'm a bit of a mama's boy. Bring her to dinner, man. Always love spending time with her and my brother. I want my closest family. So my closest family, my mom and my bro. I want them to be there. With you know those two celebs. So they would get to experience it with me.
That's awesome. So basically, you're taking Joe Rogan round for dinner.
Yeah, pretty much. Joe Rogan and Pink Floyd.
When I've had some absolute crackers. I'm trying to think who it was, but somebody started off with Jesus Christ, and I went, okay, because I'm spiritual, and I went, yeah, that's fine. And then they said, I'm trying to think who it was. Was it Abraham Lincoln or somebody? It was like somebody. I don't think it was somebody as well known as Abraham Lincoln. And the next song was Genghis Khan, and I could see them going through their head of like pulling off, their kind of interests, and it was just that moment of Genghis Khan and Jesus. That's
Yeah, that'd be
it was just it's like kind of you. But I love like how some people kind of like were talking like it was all their like some family members had passed away, or some people were all celebrities or like presidents. You could see that it's a delve into somebody's psyche about it. So if you had to sum up your life in a movie or a song title, is there anything that kind of jumps to mind? This was about your sex life originally, but I thought I better take that out.
Yeah, I'd probably say Rise Above would be the title.
Oh, nice choice. I like it. Because some people, originally it was kind of a cheeky question, and you get the kind of stock, gone in 60 seconds or whatever, just like, I thought, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right for me.
It's like, you maybe don't want to promote that too much. Like,
Yeah.
so has there been a book that kind of sums up your life? Like, is there something that really kind of helped you that you've read over and over, or has maybe helped you in a dark time that you've just thought, yeah, that's it for me? For me, I love the Harry Potter series. I don't know, but like I kind of grew up, but that got me back into reading. For example, what books would you love to, or gift, as Tim Ferriss would say?
Yeah, I definitely am not much of a reader. I've always been, I'm someone that when I pick up a book, I fall asleep in about 3 minutes from reading it, even if I like it for the most part. So, but there's a book the only book that I've read multiple times in my life that I can remember is a book called The Spiritual Warrior. And I can't even recall exactly what the book was about, but I just always remember at different stages of my life, and this was probably in my teenage years, reading that book and just always feeling this just some connection to that book. Like I always finished that book and felt like I had grown in some way. Um, so yeah, it would be that book.
So, if you had to give an unusual fact about yourself, is there anything that you tell people, that makes them go, whoa? Like, have you got a secret talent? Have you got like an unusual way of like turning cherry pips into animals, or I mean, like, is there something that you can do that people are really shocked by, or an interest that people are kind of really surprised by?
No, I don't have any. I don't have any hidden talents. Although I will say a fun fact about me, and I'm going to include my older brother in this. So sorry, Joe. But when we were young kids, I don't know if you remember the hip hop group Criss Cross.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. A little jump, jump. So me and my brother, and I was just thinking about this the other day. Actually, so it's funny you brought up this question because I actually kind of wanted to share it with somebody. Me and my brother used to put our jeans on backwards, and we used to fucking blast this song, the song "Jump," and we used to just jump around on my mom's bed when we were, freaking 6, 7, 8 years old. So yeah, that's all I got for you.
I've now got that song stuck in my head. It's just going back. Oh,
Great
I'll
tune.
be doing that all night long. Like, well, I cannot thank you enough for this. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. I knew you were going to be a fantastic guest, but you blow me away with, how open and honest and deep you've gone. But what do you want people listening to take from this? Apart from obviously checking out your stuff and following you, like, what would you give as a go home message to the guys listening?
Yeah, no, I feel like that's definitely a multi-layered answer for me. I definitely, selfishly, I definitely do this for me. This is therapeutic for me, and I know I've shared that throughout the podcast that helping others is very therapeutic for me, and it is imperative that I continue to do this kind of stuff to maintain my own sobriety and just continue to live a good life, man. So, um, it's definitely I think important to if you're somebody out there that is gone through something or whatever, dealing with something, to be open about it. It may not have to be on such a large platform like myself, but it could be to some friends or something, and hopefully I inspire someone to reach out, man, and share their message to try and help others. I feel like if we were all just in a constant state of trying to carry a positive message of hope and support, that obviously the world would just be a much better place, and that I think anything's possible. I don't think that I was the worst drug addict that there ever was or anything like that, but I'm someone who was in some really dark times, man. Like, I just wanted it to end, and to have gone from that place to 13 years later being the man I am today, and living the life that I'm living, man. It is surreal. It is surreal, and it's just such a gift, and I hope that my story, man, touches somebody, or touches a family member of somebody who's struggling with some of the same stuff that I struggle with, and maybe give them some hope. I had someone reach out to me the other day that said, "Hey, a friend of mine, son is really struggling, and I showed her your story on YouTube, and it gave her a ton of hope for her son." And like, even that kind of like chokes me up a little bit, man, because it's like, it's just my story. Like, if it could have effect on one person like that, um, that's going through such a hard time, is it's such a gift, man, that I'm able to impact people that in that way. So, hopefully someone just got something out of this today, and it's got a little bit more inspiration, a little more motivation to get out there and just attack their life, and realize that we might only get one shot at this thing, and to really just make it the best life that you can.
I love that. It's you're using your experiences to give people hope, and it's even if it helps somebody understand somebody who's going through it. I think it's amazing. But to be able to actually give somebody who's going through it, who's maybe got no one else to understand it, to talk to, the ability to not judge them and to understand them, and to understand like the cravings and stuff like that, it's an amazing thing. And I really think you should look at like help, like building a product, or working with guys who are in these kind of environments, because I think you could transform lives. Not that you're not already doing it, but it's just you've got a way of sort of connecting with people, and I think you're really gonna go some places. And I think you should be a lot more known. You've had an amazing transformation, and I don't think some of the other interviews I've seen of you do you justice. Because it doesn't really explore your story enough, and it doesn't show the amazing transformation to go from being suicidal to like built like a brick shit house, and building a business and rekindling your relationship with your family, and overcoming something that can destroy families. You've got an amazing story there. You should be deeply proud of what you've done. You're the kind of person that I would. That's why I built this site, because these are the kind of people that I want to showcase to guys that there is more in life than just sitting having a few beers and sitting watching TV. You can be what you want to be. It's difficult, and you've got to step out of your comfort zone, but there is that capability, and this is why I speak to guys like yourself. It's to motivate myself, and if it changes me, that's brilliant. But if it can change anybody else, it blows me away that other people listen. And I'm just there to kind of to record it and put it out to guys. So how can guys keep in touch with you? How can they get in touch and buy your products, follow you on social media, maybe drop you an email, and ask you a question or something?
Yeah, you can reach me in a couple different ways. So you can email me at Jay at jtmfit.com. You can also find me on Instagram at jtm_fit. And you can also check out my programs at www.thefunctionalmethod.com.
Perfect. Well, I cannot thank you enough for this. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can wish you nothing but success for the future. You're going places, and just keep inspiring and just keep doing what you're doing.
That's it for another week. Thanks for listening. Absorb it, practice it, use it. Until next time, keep trying to hit that next level in your life.